All right, welcome everyone to July Radio Hour with URI Master Gardeners. My name is Francesca Gallo. I am the Program Associate with the URI Master Gardener Program. We are based at the University of Rhode Island within the Cooperative Extension. Our mission is to educate the public in Rhode Island and surrounding areas through environmentally sound horticultural practices through the dissemination of factual research-based information. And radio has been for a long time, and this is an exciting new way to get that information to more folks. Even as we come, out of COVID in some ways, it's great to have all these different options for you to get your information. So if you're here, you pre-registered for this event, thank you. We gave folks the opportunity to submit questions in advance when they were registering, so we'll be addressing lots of those questions here today. But you are also more than welcome to event chat or in the Q&A, and I'll be kind of organizing those in the back end for our panelists, so we have a good combination of live questions and pre-submitted questions. And we'll try to get through as many as we can. If you pre-submitted a question, we don't get to it, don't work on to our hotline. I'm back there shortly, probably later this. Richard Gonzalez, who we see for today. Richard is a master gardener from IT. He also holds a couple leadership positions in our volunteer program. His areas of expertise include container gardening, vegetable gardening, with a growing emphasis on pests, native plants, and permaculture. So, Richard, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Francesca. I appreciate you being with us. I know that you got some storms in your area, and that may be accounting for some of the in and out that we're experiencing with your voice and video. Thank you for being with us. We are very fortunate to have some excellent panelists tonight, and I appreciate you all being here. I'm just going to give a quick Ed Services update in the event that you all aren't aware. As Francesca mentioned, we have the hotline up 5 days a week now to answer gardening questions by email and by phone. And I believe she mentioned that if there are any questions that were submitted tonight that don't get answered, we will be submitting them to the hotline and they'll be getting back to you via email. Other Ed Services updates, we have several kiosk and soil testing stations at some of their usual places, mostly farmers markets, also Slater Mill, Wilcox Farm, and there should be a full list on the Master Gardener website. And this is our first radio hour at 7 p.m. We've switched from a Saturday format to Tuesdays at 7. And we do not have a date for our August radio hour, but we will announce it soon. So I'm going to start off. I see a slide here. Let's see. A slide showing the June radio hour. I think that's prompting me to mention that the June radio hour is up online, available to be seen on YouTube and apparently SoundCloud, if you want to go back and see some of our previous ones. So I'm going to kick this off with some questions. Attendees, if you have a question and you'd like to hear what our panelists have to say about it, please enter that into the chat. I'll be monitoring that. Francesca will be monitoring that, and we'll be sure to take your questions as promptly as we can. But to start off, we've got one from Judith in Barrington. She says something is eating the flowers of Echinacea, her purple cone flowers, and she suspects Asiatic beetles or earwigs. And what can be done about that? Would anybody like to kick it off?
Let's stump her.
I'll try.
Sure. Okay.
So if it's earwigs, one of the things I found with it, because earwigs are really tenacious, if you put a board or something that they can hide under on the ground underneath, that's how you can catch them and just basically put them in a bucket of soapy water or whatever you want to do with them. That's how I've found how to get rid of earwigs, or just squish them when you see them.
Well, Richard, the question was, what's eating my echinacea?
Oh,
It was. Thank you, Sandra. No. The
Oh.
question was, what's eating my echinacea? I suspect Asiatic beetles or
Oh.
earwigs.
Okay.
Yeah, so for a detective point of view, how do we know it's the earwigs or the Asiatic beetle? I'm not convinced that it's either one of those two pests. Could it be something else?
It could. The person who asked this question isn't here with us currently,
Mhm.
so we cannot ask her.
Yeah. I've grown coneflowers before and really never have had a problem. So unfortunately, I really can't contribute at this point.
Yeah, I could say the same. I've had coneflowers for years and years with no problem.
I haven't either have any problem with them. But
Well,
one way for her to diagnose it is, like I said, if she puts something down for the earwigs to hide under, she'll know that's what it is. And
Good point.
the Asiatic beetles usually, or the beetles seem to come out at dusk. So she wants to go out there with a flashlight. That would also be helpful.
Smart.
Diagnose it a little more.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question here from Brian Shea, who added his question previously and is in attendance tonight. He's asking about weed control in the vegetable garden. Maybe, Brian, if you could enter into the chat a little more information about that, we can come back to it. I'm sure we would have some a lot of information about weed control in the vegetable garden in a general sense, but perhaps you have a little more direct of a question to ask us. So here's one from Manabu in North Attleboro. I would love to grow vegetables in my garden, but it's mostly the area is mostly covered with trees. What vegetables are good for shady gardens?
Well, if I may, it depends how much shade, and certainly if you can get something in before all the trees leaf out in early spring, that's fantastic. But if you have an area that gets 3, even 4 hours of sun a day, there are some things that you can plant, like lettuces, peas, chard, kale, mint, ginger. Let's see, I made a list. Arugula, Asian greens, mustard, dill, cilantro, coriander, tarragon, chives, endive. And so, you have to look and see what is the brightest part of that shade garden, perhaps. But certainly, with the weather we've been having, planting a fall crop of peas or planting some lettuce or some beets or chard right about now, kale, could work very nicely.
It is important to find out how much light there is, because if it's full shade, the answer is basically forget it. Yeah.
Thank you both. Very helpful. So another question is, my viburnums, specifically Denodatum and nanny berries, Carlesi, had
Yeah.
something that curled the leaves. I expected it to uncurl and find a worm, but nothing. Last year it was a couple, and now this year the whole row. Does anybody have experience with that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, me neither. I thought that would be a
No.
good one.
That's a hotline question.
All right. Send it on to the hotline.
They'll have to look it up in the books.
So Brian Doyle is with us, and he pre-registered a question for us. He asks, what causes pumpkin plants to wilt and die? Could it be blight?
We all know this one, don't we?
Yep.
It's probably a squash vine borer that gets into the stem. Usually late June, early July is when the eggs are laid, and then by the end of July, the worms are burrowing their way through the stem and the plant is not getting nourishment and water, and it wilts accordingly and eventually dies. It's a tough bug to get rid of because it's inside the plant. I've seen methodologies of trying to get down on your hands and knees close to it and use a knife to slit the stem and then try to get this very ugly white squishy worm with a black head out of there.
Yeah.
And kill it. But the plant is damaged. It's a tough bug. What I do now is I plant squash late. I don't even put them in the ground until mid-July to beat the wasp that lays the eggs. And then if you do want to plant in the spring, row covers. The only way to keep the vine borer wasp out of its little mission.
Tom, I have to agree 100% with what you said. I was taught that, I got that, the exact same problem within 2 days, 20 feet, the whole row of squash, one by one, the leaves just wilted. And one of our fellow master gardeners said almost what Tom said verbatim. And I got out there and I got my little knife and I made a little slit in the vine, and there it was.
Ugly sucker, huh?
Oh yeah, really. He got squished real fast. And then I was advised you might be able to save the plant if you cover the wound that you just created, with some a good soil and keep it moist. So I tried that, but it didn't work. So the lesson I took from that, the whole business, is now I do not plant my squash until after July 4th.
Right.
And
Even later.
Yeah.
I mean, with the falls that we've been having, I mean, I was harvesting butternut squash in early October last year. And that's another point.
Yeah.
Butternut squash is the most resistant to this bug. But acorns, zucchinis, yellow squash, pumpkins, they love them.
Yep.
Well, thanks, guys. That's very helpful. And I hope Brian was able to get some good information from that.
Oh, so also, Brian, if your plants are shot now, you still have a chance. You could try to plant if you have a full sun and the weather holds up. You could try to replant, and it's unlikely that the wasp is still out there, and you should get plants and fruit by late fall.
All right. So we've got a few people that just joining us, including Shannon Carbonneau from Coventry, and she had asked a question previously, registered a question. My zucchinis got powdery mildew every summer. I swap places in the garden, water as little as possible. I lift up the plants and water around them in my raised beds, and they always rot. Help.
Well, the science has always been to one of the sciences has always been to spray a solution of milk and water on them, and I had not done that until the last couple of years, and I find it to be successful. You can't stop the rot, as you say, but you can slow it down a great deal. So it's about a 1 to 3, 1 to 4 mix of milk and water in a spray bottle, and just spray as much of this leaf surface as you can, top and bottom. Oh, and if there's any leaves that are affected, get rid of them immediately. Cut them off and don't put them in your compost pile. Just get rid of them. And if you combination of the affected leaves being removed and spraying the milk and water, I've found that I can hold it off until really late in the season.
I would just echo what Tom said. Got to spray the top and the bottom of the leaves. The powder shows up on the top, but the actual living mildew is on the bottom.
Crop rotation may help.
It's mostly weather related, though, I think. I mean,
Okay.
you could try that, but it's that August humidity that really gets it started. But it's probably
We did have a lot of
to your
rain
point.
this past July.
Yeah. The mosquitoes know it.
So I know that we had some other questions, and Lorraine is not here, but I know, Laura, you had prepared an answer for her question about a pink dogwood in
No,
2013. Oh, no?
no, not mine.
Okay. Never mind then. I had that that was in the form incorrectly. Maybe you prepared something about
Lemon
saffron?
trees.
Yes. Would you like to talk about lemon trees, please? Or should I read it?
I'm happy to, but the question, please, sir.
Yes, please. So the question was from Audrey in Cranston, and she asked, a lemon plant with two potential lemons growing on it has started to show leaves of a faded green, which eventually dry and fall off. Are the two lemons doomed?
Well, Audrey, not in my experience. Maybe they're doomed, but a lemon tree, and I'm going to assume that it's in a container and it's inside or outside, but the leaves are very sensitive, and any kind of stress, overwatering, underwatering, temperature swings, which we've been having, right, left, and center, can cause the leaves to fall. That doesn't mean that they're not going to come back, and they may releaf fairly soon. Where you are definitely going to lose the lemons is if you've got a lemon that's not yet fully formed, that's dark green, and all of a sudden starts turning a little less green and more yellow, and then that's going to, no question. But the other thing, Audrey, is even if you lose them, it has a chance to rebloom in the fall, perhaps. So good luck. But I have certainly had lemon leaves drop and had full lemons develop perfectly fine.
Thanks, Laura. So we have a question from Anne in Pawtucket. She asks, I'd appreciate advice on cucumber beetles. I covered a 4x4 bed with floating fabric cover. I'll take the cover off when flowers appear and need to be pollinated. Do the plants need to be recovered for the entire growing season?
Roger, you got this one?
I don't know for sure. On one hand, if you cover them, that's being very conservative, and you're going to assure greatest success. You do have to, as she pointed out, remove the cover after the flowers have come up and pollinated. But now if you have fruit growing, boy, it's a flip. I have a suggestion. Cover half. Do an experiment, because gardening is all an experiment. So cover half with it and see what happens. And actually, if she could give us some feedback at the end of the season to see which way to share her results with us, because we do get a lot of information from the growers, from people out there. So that's my suggestion: is experiment, cover half, leave the other half uncovered, and let us know what happens.
I think that's a great suggestion, Roger. Thanks. So we have a question, and this actually goes back to one of the first things that they teach you when you enroll in the Master Gardeners program. What qualities specifically help differentiate between well-draining, sandy, rich, loamy, and other types of soil? When reading the plant tags at the greenhouse, it can be difficult to understand what needs to be done to the soil and how to do it. Would anybody like to field this one?
Well, that's right up the soil texture alley, because that's what we're talking about, is soil texture. The physical part of soil, the part of soil that most people think about is what you see. It's comprised of sand, silt, clay, and organic material. That's half of the soil. The other half is 25% air and 25% water. So we're looking at the balance between sand, silt, clay, and organic material. Predominantly around here, sandy loam. That's what 9 out of 10 samples we get at the hotline, out in the farmers markets, out in the field. It's sandy loam, loamy sand. We do have a couple of clay deposits in Rhode Island, And it's interesting, some of the soil samples we do get, you can immediately tell if they've been amended, if the owner has taken a lot of care of them. You can really tell by the texture, and the texture is really how it feels. If you take a little sand, some soil and you squish it between your fingers, if you have that gritty feeling, it's going to be predominantly sandy. If it's soft and flowery, now we're looking more toward the silty aspect of it. Of course, what we have here in southern New England, mostly sandy loam. You have good drainage with the sand, that's great. But the bad part about it is, along with the water drainage, there go the nutrients. So it's common, or it's advisable to, I like to use water soluble fertilizer and feed them every 10 days or so, every week, 10 days, 2 weeks. That way you have more of a control over it. So I think what the question is getting down to is really the texture of it, the water holding capacity of it, and the nutrient holding capacity of it. Tom?
That's great.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could have said it better.
No, I don't either. Very and one nicely done.
Thank you, Roger. So Sarah asks, I want to change a section of my garden to be natural plantings, less grass and edible plants. Less grass, comma, more edible plants. What is the best way to do this? Is there a good book you would recommend? I don't know where to start.
Well, I think that the first thing, Sarah, is to know that tomorrow Tom is involved with something with ground covers versus lawns, which would be a very good place to start. But the first thing you need to do is you need to clear your land. And you do that by, or I do that anyway, by taking layers of newspaper or some nice thick cardboard and wetting it, and then putting soil and compost on top and planting straight from there. And the next thing you want to do is to figure out what native plants, what edible plants. And luckily, URI has a native plant guide. And they also have, even, which might be more helpful, a native plant solution site booklet that gives you, all sorts of different, what are your conditions and what are you trying to do? And they actually give you sort of little recipes as to what plants go where. And then along with that, there are, as you asked, a number of books. The first one is Doug Tallamy's Bringing Nature Home, and any of his books are helpful just to sort of get your arms around what is natural and what it's going to bring and all of that. And then for the edible parts, I very much like Lee Reich's books. He's got a number of them. And Eric Tosenmeyer has perennial vegetables. He also has one about what he grew on his little land in Massachusetts. And sort of, I guess, the grand dame of this is Edible Landscaping, which has been around forever. And although it's based with a California garden, she does have an appendix in the back of what will grow in the Northeast.
Wow, you have quite the library.
I do. Lots of books here.
That's neat.
Thank you.
I can add a little bit because I just turned a lot of lawn into native plantings. And I didn't do the newspaper and stuff. I just added a lot of compost over the top of the grass and left it until I did it in the spring and left it till the fall. But I live in Warwick and I can get free compost at our station, at our transfer station. They compost all our leaves and stuff, so it's free. And then I just planted right in it, and the grass underneath had decomposed in that time. And you talked about the native plant guide. I would suggest, I printed it out, and on the top of it, it tells you what's good for dry sun, shade, dry shade. And I just I put a little notation on all the plants that were what I needed for what area. And I carried that with me when I went to different places, so that when I saw a plant, sometimes they're not always marked as native, but they are. And so I had my list that I could just run down my list and look at it.
Nice, thank you both. So let's see. We have a general question about rose, hydrangea, peony, and hosta maintenance. But that's pretty much how it was worded. So if anybody would
Wow.
like to speak on
It begs the question, what is the question really about?
well, the actual text of the question is anything about rose maintenance, comma, hydrangeas, comma, peonies, and hostas.
Cut the herbaceous peonies down to the ground and put it in the trash every year so
When?
you don't get boitress.
When,
Leave the
Laura,
peonies
when?
alone.
In the fall when
Oh,
they
in the fall. Thank you.
Okay.
hydrangeas. Let's see. Afternoon, morning sun, afternoon shade. That's why they all droop in the afternoon if they're in the sun. Everybody thinks that they need water. It's because they don't tolerate afternoon sun. So morning sun, afternoon shade.
Roses as much as possible too?
What's that?
Isn't that the rule for roses as much as possible too? Morning sun and afternoon shade?
Roses are not my forte, I'll admit it.
Yeah, not mine either, but
I
I don't
have-
buy
yeah.
tea roses. I just buy floribundas and climbers, and they're tougher.
Yeah, I
So they
have
can
two
handle-
climbers.
Yeah, they can handle almost anything.
Yeah, they do. They do.
And hostas are low maintenance. All just to keep the plant nice. After it blooms, I cut the flower stalks off, or in some cases, if I don't like the flowers, I cut the flower stalks off before they flower. But
Yeah.
that and keep the deer off of them, and they're pretty low maintenance.
Yep.
I saw a great tip for keeping deer off of them from a fellow master gardener who was on our panelist in the past.
Yeah, what was that?
She had these little plastic containers filled with garlic that were
I've seen that.
attached to
Yeah.
hostas. And she
Yeah.
lives out in the middle of nowhere where the deer come out every night to see what they can find from her. And the
Yeah.
hostas were untouched, so
That's
Wow.
good.
That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
I use them myself, especially in spring when the tulips come up, because you put one right side up and right by the tulip, and they don't eat the tulip. But otherwise, every tulip gets eaten.
Right, just the tulip, right? Someone said they just go right across and eat all the tulip.
Yeah, they like it all,
They do. I don't have
and
them.
crocus too, same thing.
Peeled or unpeeled?
You do
Garlic.
that?
The garlic.
oh, the garlic, it comes in these little
Is it peeled
tubes.
or unpeeled?
So I think
Put it in
it's
the cup.
previously peeled and mashed, quite frankly. That it comes already stuffed in the tubes.
It does.
Yeah.
No, that's probably something. There's probably recipes out there. Or make your own garlic spray. I bet that would probably work too. Same idea. Except every time you spray, if it rains, you have to keep spraying.
Right.
I wonder if that works on rabbits.
Rabbits. Bad year for rabbits.
Yep.
Oh,
Cat fur. The old standby. That'll work on rabbits if you can
What's-
keep it in place.
Elmer Fudd's rifle, I think.
Yep.
that's what I thought. he
No, that's
meant.
for groundhogs.
That too.
My only experience, just to throw 2 cents in, I had, maybe 20 feet of hostas. I planted them years ago and they're obviously quite small. And they grew and grew and grew and got so huge, I wasn't really sure what to do with them. And early in the spring, when that mound just starts to sprout, and you can see an inch or two of the hosta coming up nice and green, probably in April, I guess, I would take the spade out and just cut them in either in half or in quarters, and then transplant them, nice deep hole, some organic material, transplant them, and boom, they did fine. So dividing the hostas early in the spring is economical, and it's a good way to spread them out.
So do you have 40 and 60 feet of hosta now?
I moved. Yeah, I have been by the old house, and yeah, there's hostas everywhere.
I bet.
They're hardier than people think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're
So-
edible if you just cut them off when they first put their noses up in spring.
Is that so? Edible?
Yes.
Edible for deer.
No, edible for us.
Oh,
Just the
okay, I
first little inch and a
have no
half.
experience. Good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Much like greenbrier, I suppose.
No,
Yeah,
I don't think so. You can eat greenbrier?
absolutely. It tastes like asparagus.
Wow.
Really?
You're thinking of knotweed, aren't you?
I understand you can eat that too. And then it
I
tastes like
understand that too, but I never heard of greenbrier before.
Yeah, I encountered a bunch going looking for mushrooms once, and if you can pull it off at the right point, and it's obviously not, it's the young shoots.
Before the thorns, right?
Yeah.
Very tasty.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the hosta tip. I did not know that. So another question we have is what do blossom and what? No, when does blossom end rot set in on tomatoes this time of year? What? I think you get the gist.
This time of year is exactly when it sets in. And I learned last year from my own experience that tomatoes like a constant watering regimen. So blossom end rot usually occurs when the tomato is experiencing unequal amounts of water. Like if it rains and then you don't water for 2 weeks, and then it rains again. They like rain. They like water every couple of days, and it should be a constant amount. That's when your blossom end rot occurs. Which reminds me, I should water tonight.
You're not on an
Watch out.
automatic timer yet?
No, not yet.
Watch
I
out
did
for
just
the
get water out
mosquitoes,
to the
they're
garden
down.
though. What, Sandra?
I said, watch out for the mosquitoes. I was attacked last night pretty
I
badly.
bet. Yeah, they're out there.
So how would you manage blossom end rot once it's set in?
You start your watering and keep it consistent and give up on the ones that show the blossom end rot. Throw them in the woods.
The whole plant, or just cut off?
No,
Oh,
the
no,
fruit.
tomato. Yeah.
Okay.
Once the tomato fruit has started with blossom end rot, it's really not. It can't be safe. But if you start watering, especially this time of year, there's still lots of tomatoes out there to be formed. So the plant is not sick. It just needs water constantly.
Thanks, Tom. So that brings us to a good question, and I mean one that we've addressed here before on the radio hour, and that is, what is the right amount of watering and nutrients for our common vegetable garden plants? And this person asks about tomatoes, peppers, beets, etc., and herbs.
Roger.
Well, get your soil tested. Here at URI, pH and texture is all we're able to do. So I highly recommend early in the spring, next March, don't wait till mid-April, do it early. Get a soil sample and send it out to UConn, UMass. They'll provide a complete analysis that includes your macronutrients, which is your calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, phosphate, potassium. Your micronutrients, your boron, iron, copper, manganese, aluminum. They'll also give you some base saturations. They explain what that is. They do a pH, of course. Most will do a lead analysis, a percentage of organic material. Yeah, can you have too much compost? Absolutely, you can have too much compost. Your ideal range of compost or organic material is between 5 and 8%. It sounds low, but that's what they recommend. And they also will do a very important cation exchange capacity. And what's nice about UConn and UMass, though, besides sending you the numbers and the graphs as far as what is in your soil, too little, the optimum amount, or the excessive amount, they give an explanation of an interpretation on what you can do to manage this. Around here, I had mentioned before, we have a lot of sandy soil, so we do have nutrient drainage deficiency. So if you do have an excess amount, it won't take too long to get rid of it in most cases. But you have to know what you're starting with. Very often, and we find this all the time when we test soil for pH, Oh, I lime. I said, well, did you test your pH first? How do you know if you need to lime? A lot of people lime without testing and they don't, they're adding lime and maybe they don't need to. And often they'll add too much lime. So always find out where you are before you start gardening. Get a good analysis of your soil. What do you have? Then you can amend it appropriately. And it doesn't have to be every year. So I suggest start out with your baseline from Yukon, UMass, and we provide the pH texture service, and we can do that anytime for free, March through October.
Thanks, Roger. Does anybody want to address the watering part of that question?
What I'd like to say is I think that there isn't one blanket answer for that because different vegetables need different amounts of water. So I think that that's one of the things that they should look at is what they have. And then like Tom was saying, how tomatoes need watering every other day and other plants won't need, other types of vegetables won't need that much. So I think they need to look at that and see what they have and then research that which plant needs how much water.
Thanks, Sandra. So
there is a rule of thumb or something like is it 1 inch or 2 inches a week, something like that? I think
That's
I've
for
read.
grass. That's for grass, 1 inch a week.
Ah,
No,
okay.
that's for grass. I'm not sure if that would be enough for veggies.
Okay.
So the same person, Drew from Clinton, asks, what type of flowers are best for creating small pollinator gardens adjacent to vegetable gardens? And I thought the interesting question really is the adjacent to vegetable gardens. Right.
Because they want to pollinate their veggies, probably, is what I'm assuming. One of the best flowers, and I add it in my veggies, I usually leave some room for it, is alyssum. It's an annual, but it's absolutely, that small flower is really good for the pollinators. More native plants are all of the, the echinaceas. I'm trying to think what else is in my garden. The heleniums.
Milkweeds.
Milkweed, yeah, I have lots of milkweed. There's different kinds of milkweed, and I would suggest I'm okay with the common milkweed, but it is invasive if you want to call it invasive. It just depends how well you control it. But if you want something that's a little more controllable, I would go with the swamp milkweed, which, and you can tell if you've ever pulled it up, the common milkweed, it just pulls up off the root. The root spreads everywhere, where the swamp milkweed, the roots are all down along the stem. So it's much easier contained. And butterfly milkweed is also another good one too, to put in. For an annual, cosmos are really nice, and sometimes they self-sow. The bees like that too, the bees and the pollinators. And then you have to think about the bird pollinators like the hummingbirds, let's see, I'm not going to give you the, Tom can think of the Latin names, but cardinal flower is one that they absolutely
Salvias
love.
are good too, because you do want to you do want to coordinate these flowers with when the vegetables are setting fruit. So a lot of native, I mean, really a lot of our North American natives like to bloom in August and September, and that's almost a little late. So the ones that Sandra and I have named are ones that are mid-season, like June and July. They're the you want to time these flowers for when the fruit is being set.
Yep.
So Laura, the native plant guide, does that talk about when the flowers are in flower?
No, I don't think it. I don't think that it does. But I suspect that if you went on and poked around at some of the worksheets, and maybe the Rhode Island Wild Plant Society, that you would be able to lay one over the other and figure that out.
Okay.
I would just also say that adjacent is fabulous, but you can also plant them, as Sandra was saying, in the vegetable garden itself.
Right.
All great suggestions and points. Thank you so much. So we have another question one that we get pretty regularly here, and that is, can somebody talk about controlling bindweed in the garden?
Nuclear weapons.
Determination.
Seriously, all it takes is a tiny piece of that root, and it will. I go out on wet days and where it's already established, and I just dig in and then try to follow it with my hand and try to get as much of it as possible. But it's all you're doing is you're keeping it at bay. Once a piece of ground is infested with bindweed, it's almost impossible to get rid of it. So it's one of those things where you kind of live with it. Try to keep it out of. It's like most invasives. You try to cut it off so that the leaves don't feed the root. So as soon as you see it climbing up something, just snip it at the bottom. Just keep snipping it, and eventually maybe it'll get exhausted. I'm not saying it will, but it may be. It's a morning glory. They just grow and grow and grow and grow.
They do. At the Malin Center Garden, somebody planted those 2 years ago, and I still am pulling up little sprouts.
Sandra, do we know?
Sorry,
Sandra,
Rob.
do we know who planted the morning glories in the Malin Center?
I don't. I do.
Okay.
Before her time.
Yeah, it was before my time.
The penalty is composting.
So what do you mean?
The person should be composted.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about the bindweed, which you can compost the bindweed as long as you don't compost the finished flowers.
Right.
Right.
Now, why can't you compost the finished flowers?
Because that's where the seeds are.
Seeds are, yeah, seeds.
But right up, you can pull it while it's flowering, but you got to watch the bottom of the flowers go from the bottom to the top. So even if you've gotten one that's in flower at the top, you may have missed one that flowered a week and a half ago and it's already forming seeds. So safest bet is probably not to compost it, because you are spreading the seeds when you do that. Unless your compost pile is really running hot.
Thanks, Tom. So I have one more question, and that is, with all this rain, what diseases or problems should we be looking out for in our summer vegetable garden?
Well, one came up earlier, powdery mildew, especially in August, on the cucumbers and on the squash plants. What else do we see?
Tomatoes.
Blossom and rot. Yeah.
Oh yeah, blossom and rot. Another one came up, right, with the uncertain rain. And then whoever said late blight on the tomatoes, that's a good point too. Oh, should we characterize late blight is characterized by yellowing and spotted lower leaves, particularly on the plant. It's a fungus, it's soil borne, and once it's in the soil, it's very hard to get rid of that as well. Another mitigation that I've used in the past is to spray the top and bottom of the leaves with a copper fungicide. And just like the milk and water thing, it retards it. It doesn't kill it, and then the other is proper garden maintenance. If you see things turning yellow or brown, cut them off the plant and get rid of them. Because these are all fungus mostly, and they spread with spores, and the diseased leaves spread the spores to the healthy leaves.
And
garden maintenance.
Yep. And in terms of garden maintenance, if you see something like that going on, some kind of mildew or fungus-based disease, you want to thin out the leaves and give room for air to flow.
I think
Because
too, the watering,
sorry.
what was the question that with all the rain? Because I think that's going to be part of the problem too, is if, like Tom was saying, if it rains and then you don't water for 2 weeks, that stresses your veggies out also. So making sure that they get even amount of rain, water, counting in the rain. Sometimes you think it rains, that they've gotten a lot of rain, but if you have a lot of, like a zucchini or something that has a lot of leaf cover, it's not really getting that much water.
Another thing about the inconsistent rain, Tom had brought up, the nutrients are only accepted by the plant root in solution, water. So if you have your nice macronutrients, micronutrients sitting in the soil, and if they're not in solution, if they're not in water, the plant can't absorb it. So it's also the inconsistent absorption of nutrients to the plant is another source of the stress, as well as the hydration.
Well said.
Thanks, Roger. Well, it's a few minutes early of 8, but we've run out of questions. So I really thoroughly appreciate Laura, Roger, Sandra, and Tom, all of you being here tonight to answer these questions, to share your knowledge and your enthusiasm of gardening with us. Thank you, Francesca, for organizing the background administrative work of this. For anyone who is here as an attendee, please feel free to use our feedback survey to provide feedback at any time. Invite your friends, follow the URI Cooperative Extension on Facebook and URI Master Gardener on Instagram for updates. And thank you so much for your time and your attention. I appreciate everybody being here.
All right, our pleasure.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
All right.
Well done, guys.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Likewise,
Good
good
night.
night.